What's going on, everyone? Smith here. I saw this show recently called Frieren. I'm not much of an anime person myself, so I didn't really think much of it. And, I saw the cover art and I was just like, yeah, but it's an anime, so whatever. I watched a bit of Naruto back in the day, and that was about it. I tried to watch One Piece. I tried to get into Attack on Titan and Full Metal Alchemist, and it's generally not my cup of tea. I know there are plenty of people who are like very big fans of anime. It's got a very strong fan base, but it's generally just not for me. That said, this show is very much right up my alley in terms of things that I like. And I was astonished at how good it was. It's easily one of my favorite shows now. I was immensely impressed with how good the show is. I love the idea for the show. It's, the title is Beyond Journey's End, right? Frieren Beyond Journey's End. And it's because the show takes place after the big adventure that would normally be the show, right? So that is definitely a clever twist. And you might be asking, well, what's the show about then? Well, the big adventure where our heroes go to slay the Demon King, in that group of heroes, one of them is an elf. If you know anything about elves in fantasy, they tend to live a very, very, very long time. And we're basically following the elf character on her adventures as tremendous amounts of time pass, and she learns to appreciate the time with her human friends more over the course. Like, in the beginning, she's a little kind of emotionally stunted and a little distant, or maybe not even a little, maybe very distant. And it's because a lot of these people are going to die in what is to her a very brief amount of time. So she doesn't get too attached, or she didn't. Or maybe she thought she didn't, right? Because at the end of episode 1, it turns out she was very attached to her friends. That's basically the premise of the show, and it's got some really strong emotional beats throughout, and really good character work. I loved the sunrise episode. Like, it's such a trivial thing, but it's handled so well. I had the exact same perspective as Frieren did in the episode, where she's like, it's just a sunrise, what's the big deal? I'm sure it'll be pretty, but it's like, yeah, she's 1,000 years old. Do you think she hasn't seen a pretty sunrise before? Like, what's the big deal? And then you get to the end of the episode and you're like, oh, very clever show, very clever. And just little stuff like that all throughout the show. It's extremely well done. All the characters are fantastic. I don't think there's a single character in the show I don't like. At least in terms of, obviously there's characters who are like jerks, like that stuck-up earthbender guy. He was kind of a jerk. But I like his characterization. Everybody's very well written. I do think the old mage guy, him acting like he's just going to casually throw hands with Frieren, was a little silly. I was like, dude, you know her reputation and everything. And he knew about her reputation. And he's like, yeah, we're going to throw it out. And it's like, okay. The way he talks about just getting ready to fight her, he's like, I got to wrap this up, Frieren, sorry. And it's like, who the hell do you think you are, buddy? And of course, yeah. It just, stuff like that. She's basically John Wick throughout. I heard someone make that comparison. I think that's an accurate comparison. She's basically John Wick throughout the whenever she gets in a fight. She's just a complete and total badass for the most part whenever she has to fight. And it's always very entertaining. She actually reminds me a lot of Uncle Iroh in that kind of goofy, silly, but also serious when they need to be kind of way. And I also love the setting of the world, that it's got this like RPG D&D type atmosphere about it. I think it's a very cozy show. A lot of people describe it that way. I think that's exactly right. It is, it's a show you can put on. The problem is there's too many like really heavy emotional beats for it to just be like I tried to second monitor it on my second watch through. I already knew what was all going to happen. I already seen it. And I kept pausing my game because I'd want to watch. I'd be like, oh, this part's so good. I got to watch this. Oh, this part's so good. I got to. And it's like, dang it. I can't just second monitor this show. I can't have it on in the background because there are so many good scenes that I'm like, oh, I want to watch this again. This was great. So I love it when a show can do that. It really captured my attention. And it is absolutely worth the watch. The writing is fantastic. It's, as I said, one of the best shows I've seen since maybe most recently Arcane Season 1. Or The Penguin, I guess, would be more. It's way better than The Penguin, though. Like, I'm not gonna lie. It might even be better than Arcane Season 1. Which is crazy, because well, the thing is, Frieren has no bad episodes, as far as I'm concerned. There's not a single episode I don't like. Whereas the first, 2 episodes of Arcane Season 1, I know they're laying the groundwork for what's gonna happen in the rest of the show, but it's a bit of a drag. And I know people who have watched the first 2 episodes and then they check out right before they get to episode 3 when all this stuff happens. And the rest of the show is great from there, but those first 2 episodes are a bit of a drag. But with season 1 of Frieren, I mean, the first episode hits like a ton of bricks, and then you have every subsequent episode. There's always something meaningful happening in the show. And it's just like the fight scenes, if you're going to watch it for the action, the fight scenes are fairly sparse. It's not really what it's about. But when they do show up, they're awesome. But it's really not what the show's about. It is much more about the characters and their interactions and this, socially awkward elf person trying to act more like a person, trying to use what she learned from her friends on her first journey. And by the way, there's a lot of flashbacks in this show to the original Heroes Party that kind of help contextualize what she's thinking about in the present or how she's trying to act in the present. I have never seen a show use flashbacks as effectively as this show does. I think this might be the best, by far. I can't think of a single show that uses flashbacks as well as this show. I'm not saying they aren't out there. I just probably haven't seen them, because this was great. Naruto is an excellent example of how to badly use flashbacks, because you get stuck in flashback hell for 3 episodes or something, and I'm like, do I really need 3 episodes of a flashback? I didn't ask for your whole life story, buddy. But all the flashbacks in Frieren they don't overstay their welcome, for one, and they're very meaningful. And they're usually telling us something that's incredibly relevant to whatever's going on in the present. So, it just, across the board, very efficient, very effective use of flashbacks. I also like the way they wrote the demons in the show. They're the kind of primary antagonists. I mean, the big bad that the original Hero Party defeated was the Demon King. So, not very subtle with oh yeah, the big bad, the Demon King. It's yeah, okay. Alright, which, I mean, it's fine. It was fine. And I like the way they handled the demons. They're not... Frieren describes them as strictly evil, but that may not necessarily be true. But also, they're so dangerous that you might as well operate as they are strictly evil. And there's this huge debate I've seen with many people online as to whether or not, Frieren being hyper prejudiced against the demons is a good thing. To which I would say, yes, it is a good thing, at least given the circumstances that they find themselves in. Demons are incredibly powerful, incredibly dangerous, and they eat people. And they're extremely likely to continue eating people. And there's no reason to believe that they won't. So, given all of that, if one demon were to turn out to be friendly, you wouldn't really be able to know or even trust if they said that they were. Like, it would, you know, it's just one of those situations where there is a debate to be had as to whether or not Frieren's description of demons is 100% accurate, but I don't think there's any room for debate on her prescription for how to deal with demons being accurate, because that was the whole point of the episode with the demon child. Is like they tried to be friendly with it, and then everything went to hell, and more people died because they didn't just kill it immediately like Frieren wanted to. Which, great episode, very emotionally complicated. It was very difficult for Himmel to deal with, because it's not your typical hero thing to like this. You know, this demon is like a monster, but it's disguised as this cute little kid. It just says, you know, they look just like people, except they got horns. Which also, like, a lot of people feel bad for Aura in the scene where Frieren drops the iconic line, Aura, kill yourself. Ara, kill yourself, whatever.
Ara, the one standing before you, is a great mage who's lived for over 1,000. Ara, kill yourself.
And, you know, she's like whimpering and scared, and like she's got tears rolling down her cheeks. And it's all, I see how it could compel you to feel bad for her, but also, you gotta remember, she's surrounded by like hundreds, if not thousands, of corpses of people she personally killed. So it's like, oh, but like, she looks like a human and she's all the big sad. And it's like, she's evil. You goofball. There's no question about her being evil. Demons more broadly, maybe you could have a debate about whether or not they're inherently evil, but you cannot debate whether or not this one in particular is straight up evil. That's, you know, that is the trickery of the demons in the show, is that they look very much like people, they talk like people, but they lie through their teeth and they try to manipulate people so they can kill them and eat them. Which, very interesting. There's been a lot of interesting conversation around it. And it's just, you know, one other element that adds a lot to the show. The Himmel-Frieren dynamic is also very compelling. And so is the Stark and Fern relationship. Really am invested in that now. It's like, and they're doing romance, I think, quite well. As a fan of romance, I have to say this show handles it quite nicely. The Himmel-Frieren thing I go back and forth on, because it's like, half the time I'm like, Himmel, you're a friggin' moron for not just telling her, and the other half I'm like, maybe it was, you know, she wasn't really emotionally mature enough. Would she even, you know, what would her response be if he did tell her at the time? I feel like she needed to lose him in order to appreciate, you know, you don't appreciate what you have until you lose it, kind of thing. It's complicated, and it's handled nicely, I think, in the show. But one does very much sympathize with poor Himmel. Especially that ring scene. That was absolutely brutal, given the context of the whole situation. With the clock tower and man, that was rough. That was, not very pleasant. I mean, it was a beautiful scene, but it's just like the context of everything. You're like, that sucks, poor guy. That's rough, buddy, to quote a very wise character from a different show. The show is great. I highly recommend it. I can't recommend it enough, really. It's it's definitely worth the watch, worth the time. And don't let the fact that it's an anime dissuade you. That was the thing that kind of kept me from watching it originally, but it was very much worth my time. And I'm glad that it was popping. Shout out to YouTube Shorts. It got me watching little clips, and then before you know it, I'm watching the whole show, and I'm like, wow, I cannot believe this almost flew completely under my radar. So, very happy about that. Alright, that's going to do it for me. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.